Last week at City Council, there was a big presentation, as everyone knows, about MAPS 3. In addition to that presentation, there were some other people that spoke about MAPS 3 and some other aspects about our city that I found very interesting. President Hensley was one of those people because he was talking about, yes, we're adding all this great new stuff to our city, and how can our police support that and do a great job? Thank you for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here, Gwen.
Tell me about the current status of the Oklahoma City Police.
Well, our manpower numbers have been significantly undermanned for a long time. The last significant increase we've had in personnel was in the 1989 sales tax. As a matter of fact, in December of 1992, Chief Sam Gonzalez did a staffing report, and at that time he was requesting additional manpower. And the numbers I have currently, depending on whose numbers you want to listen to, there's anywhere from 50 to 120 fewer police officers out there right now today answering calls for service, 911 calls, than there were in December of 1992.
That's a long time ago.
Yes, ma'am, it is. And look at it in this way. If you have a child that's fixing to graduate from high school, in their lifetime, we have not increased manpower in the Oklahoma City Police Department, in their lifetime. And not only that, we have fewer people actually out there answering calls for service than we did the day they were born.
Why is this? I mean, we're a major league city.
Well, I could suppose several reasons, but traditionally the city has not only the police department, but all city services. We have tended to neglect personnel issues there. Not only do we have this problem in the police department, I've met with the president of the firefighters local and the president of the AFSCME union, who is representative of the non-uniform employees in the city. They have similar shortages. You can't get your streets fixed. You can't get your sewer lines repaired. We've got fire stations that are unmanned. And as I pointed out in our case, we have one patrol district in Oklahoma City that is 100 square miles plus. There are times it's manned by a single police officer.
I don't think the citizens are aware of this, do you?
They may well not be.
So that's why you're here today.
Exactly.
You know, we're looking at expanding our city. We're looking at expanding the projects and bringing more people in and tourists and, everything. How are we going to do this? It almost seems like there needs to be a penny of that MAPS 3 penny that goes for police and fire and other things like that.
Well, and that was our position before council. We have never, none of the employee groups have ever been opposed to a MAPS project. We're just saying that if we're going to spend this money, let's spend it wisely, let's spend it prudently, let's spend it for the true needs of this city. And I think if you look at the projects that are proposed for MAPS 3, none of them outweigh the need for public service. Governor Schwarzenegger of California says government's first duty and highest obligation is public safety. And privately, most every council member will agree with that philosophy. However, what we're doing publicly is not that at all.
Let me ask you this. Do we have fewer police officers because there's been raises for the existing police officers, and so that's why the numbers went down?
Absolutely not. We have not increased personnel at all. And the reason we have fewer officers out there is because of the growth of this city. Most of your listeners are going to be aware of the Bricktown Entertainment District. That didn't exist in '89. That's a whole new division of officers. That took them away from answering calls for service in northwest Oklahoma City, southwest Oklahoma City, and so forth. Those officers had to come from somewhere. So we've increased the things the police department does, And most of those services absolutely were needed and necessary, but they were done without an increase in manpower. So what we did, the biggest pool of people, obviously, are those officers out there answering those 911 calls, and that's where those people came from. So now they're doing these other things that are indeed necessary, but they're not answering calls for service now.
Who's answering the 911 calls?
Well, the officers are doing, I believe they do an outstanding job, and I think Chief City would agree with me, as thinly as they are stretched. And that's a frequent complaint of our citizens that, I called for the police and it took them this long to get here. Well, the reality of the matter is that those officers aren't somewhere doing nothing. They're answering other calls for service. And as I pointed out, the instance of the one particularly large patrol district, that officer might be 20 miles from you when you call him. So it's going to take him a minute or two to get there to you.
Sure.
But more importantly, if that officer needs help urgently, or you need help urgently, it's going to take someone a long time for them to get to you. That's not unacceptable to us.
And for people that aren't familiar with the responsibilities of the president of the FOP Lodge 123, you actually are an officer, and this is your assignment now. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
So, it's not like they brought in a lobbyist or somebody else to represent them. You know the day-to-day responsibilities of officers, and the day-to-day needs of the city.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I've probably been with city government longer than any member on the horseshoe or most members of city government, no matter where they work. I've been with the police department for a third of a century. So I know the history of this city well. Obviously, I've always loved this city. I've always enjoyed working for the city and for the citizens of this city. But we're at the position now where we can't allow these manpower shortages to go overlooked any longer. It's not safe for our officers, but more importantly, it's not safe for the general public.
Now, do you feel like anyone important, I'm not particularly important, do you feel like anyone important heard what you said and is going to do something about this?
Sadly enough, Gwen, I don't think my message to council was going to change anybody's vote. I think their minds were made up when we went in there. They weren't receptive to that message.
And what were they voting on? Was this the vote for the MAPS 3?
This was actually what I would, to make it easier for your listeners to understand, what I would call a pre-vote.
Okay. They
agreed by last Tuesday's vote that they will vote this coming Tuesday to put MAPS 3, those projects, on a ballot for December 8th.
And so we still have time.
Yes, ma'am, we absolutely do.
So let me make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying you're not against MAPS 3, but that you are for meeting public safety.
Absolutely. And we have a long history, all of the employee groups have a long history of supporting the growth of the city. And let me just say that I personally have spoken to Mayor Cornett in the past and told him I thought he was doing a good job growing this city. But there's a time when you have to stop and take a look at, do we continue to grow and not catch up those services? And we're well past that point.
But that's not much fun. Going on a diet. How funny that is. That's kind of part of Mayor Mick, too, isn't it? But going on a diet is not fun. We'd rather continue growing.
Well, let me use this analogy, Gwen. How many of your listeners out there in their own personal household budgets, if they're faced with, I can't pay the electric bill to keep the lights and the heat on, I'm going to go buy a new Mercedes. I don't think you've got very many listeners that would do that. And that, in fact, in our opinion, is what the city is doing.
So what will it take for the citizens to pay attention? Are we going to have some awful thing happen and then we realize we're short-staffed?
Well, I think we've already seen that happen on occasions, but on an individual note, if you need police service and they don't get there quickly enough, what's an acceptable time frame if you're being raped, robbed, or murdered for the police to get there? Now, what we're being told is the goal is that within 9.5 minutes we can get a policeman to you. Well, I guarantee you, if you're in that situation, 9.5 minutes is not quick enough.
No. In fact, the first half
we can't even reach that goal today.
The first half of our interview is over, and it was 9.5 minutes. How about that? I became interested in your message when I saw you make a presentation at City Council. And it was, you were a citizen speaking as they were discussing the MAPS 3 idea. And as you pointed out earlier, that last Tuesday in